Over to Nick.
Possibly. Thank you, Callum. I've got some pretty pictures in Sky Notes, but I don't think anything that can compete with those extraordinary pictures from Juno. I mean, they just are incredible. Okay, so Summer Sky Notes. Summer Sky Notes is always looking ahead further than most because we don't have another meeting until September, so I'll try and cover all the exciting things that are happening over the summer. But I always like to start with some pretty pictures, and Alan too, up in the north of Scotland, usually comes up with the goods. This is a lovely picture of a lighthouse on the north coast of Scotland. It features prominently in a lot of his pictures, and just a very, very pretty picture with the sky in the background. So let's start at the middle of the solar system, as I always do. The sun, of course, not very active at the moment, but there has been some activity. This picture by Mick Jenkins shows a small active area group that was there at the beginning, about the 23rd of May. And then this picture by Paul Brearley shows the sun in H alpha with not much on it other than the normal mottling you get. So the sun at the moment, as it has been for a while, has been fairly inactive. We're coming up to the summer solstice, of course, which means that it's also not much dark time at night. So if you are a solar observer, at least you've got a long time of the day to look at it, but you haven't got an awful lot to look at. Despite the low activity, we've been getting some nice aurorae, at least we have if you happen to be in the north of Scotland, where they seem to have a combination of really nice dark skies and clear skies as well at night. Again, another couple of wonderful pictures from Alan too, showing the aurora there with some structure, and Dennis Brzezinski, who is extremely annoying and continues to email me pictures that he's taken of the aurora and all kinds of phenomena from his observatory in northern Scotland as well. So he gets probably better weather than we do in the southeast, and he doesn't have all the light pollution and aircraft contrails and all the other things that we have to contend with. The only good thing at the moment is that it's so bright up there he can't really do any nighttime observing until August. Hello Dennis, if you're watching this video online. Of course, we're coming into the noctilucent cloud season. If you have a look on the BAA website at the moment, there's notes on how to observe NLCs. NLCs, I'm not sure whether they're really astronomical objects, but you observe them with similar kind of techniques to astronomical objects. They're seen in the twilight. They're very high altitude clouds with very intricate structure. And one of the things that you can do with NLCs these days with modern digital cameras is you can take a sequence of pictures and you can run those pictures together into a time lapse, which is what I've done here with a display which was around a few years ago. You can distinguish the NLC here because they have really interesting fine structures, and they're a kind of silvery colour compared to the tropospheric clouds, which happen to be going in the opposite direction, in fact, in front of them. So start watching out for NLCs now. What I tend to do these days is just stick a camera up and leave it running through the night, looking to the north around the best time for NLCs, and look at it in the morning, see if anything's been recorded during the night. The BAA, keep an eye on the BAA website and register on the BAA email list for any notifications of NLCs, because certainly some people will be out. If they see them, they'll report them, and then they get reported on the mailing list for you to go out and have a look. So if we just have a look at the night sky, starting in the evening twilight, looking over to the west, we've got, of course, the planet Venus, which is very, very difficult to miss, very bright object in the western sky at twilight. But one thing that is difficult to miss, and Callum said I've just come back from La Palma, this picture was not taken from Chelmsford. It wasn't taken from England, it was taken from about halfway up the mountain in La Palma, and it shows a thing called the zodiacal light. The zodiacal light is basically dust in the plane of the solar system, mainly left by comets, so at least I'm responsible for that, reflecting the sunlight back to us. So in this picture, this is a 15mm wide-angle lens picture. You've got Venus down here, and you can see the zodiacal light going up through Gemini, through Cancer, that's Praesepe there, into Leo. Something that's very, very difficult to see from this country because of light pollution, but it helps at this time of the year that the ecliptic makes a large, high, acute angle with the horizon. So if you are at a dark site, somewhere in the UK, during the twilight, have a look out for this as the sky darkens. It's very, very difficult to see. And it's something which you need the sky to be dark enough to be able to see the zodiacal light, which at this time of the year is getting more and more difficult. But if you're on holiday somewhere south of here and you do have some clear skies, it's definitely one of the things to look out for in the evening sky. But of course, Venus is the main show in the evening sky at the moment. Here are some really nice drawings by Richard McKim. So Venus was at Superior Conjunction, that is on the opposite side of the Sun, back in January. It's coming to greatest elongation east in the middle of August, on August the 17th, and just before that it gets to effectively its half-phase theoretical dichotomy, which is on August the 15th. And that's a time to observe Venus basically for the days before and after it, to actually judge when you think the half-phase of Venus really is. There is an effect that makes, I think, is it early? Normally shows effect, or is it late? It's early. There's an effect that makes the half phase appear to be half earlier than the theoretical time. There's a thing called Schroter's effect. It's something you can watch out for as you observe Venus. But as Richard has done here, even with a relatively small telescope, what was the aperture of this, Richard? Oh, a 3-inch telescope. Even with a 3-inch telescope, you can actually make good observations of Venus, and there are some subtle markings here on the surface. And if you can do that with a 3-inch telescope, anyone who's got access to telescopes like that or larger, just have a look at Venus, preferably when it's fairly high up in the sky, because obviously as it gets lower down, when you actually see it as a very bright twinkling object in the evening sky, you're not going to get very good seeing. So try and observe it in the daytime if you can. Just be very careful that you don't point your telescope anywhere near the sun. Here are a few more. These are by David Basie, again showing drawings made with different colour filters, showing different features on the surface, and again showing that visual observation of planets is a worthwhile thing to do. These were taken off the BAA members pages, and so again, if you make observations, put them on the members page, but don't forget, please also send them to the relevant section director. Don't expect that the section director is going to be able to kind of trawl through all the stuff on the members pages to find what you're doing. Send it to the director as well. And Paul, of course, has been drawing it. This was with a slightly larger instrument, isn't it, Paul? What one's? Yeah, this is the 8-inch reflector. Again, showing those very, very subtle features on the planet. So Venus is a difficult target to observe because the features are very subtle. But as with all objects, the more experience you get observing it, the longer that you spend actually looking at it, the more you'll end up seeing. Also in the evening sky is another interesting object, which is not a planet, but it's a nova, or a dwarf nova. It's V392 Perseus, and it's a very odd object. It's a recurrent nova, so it's been seen to go into outbursts before, but it had always been considered to be a dwarf nova, so that the outburst amplitude wasn't actually that large. But Gary Poyner on our message board on the website, and this is the first indication I saw of it, posted that this was a really interesting outburst because it was much, much brighter than this object had ever been before. Essentially, it was a full-blown nova outburst, which is almost unique. We think there are a couple of other examples of this, but it's a very, very special outburst. As you can see, it's not in the ideal place. It's basically, even though it's V392 Per, it's actually not far from Capella, very low down in the northwest at the moment, so you need a reasonably good northwestern sky to see it. And this is a picture I took with a camera lens. You've got Capella here, you've got the triangle of stars to the right of Capella, and the nova is up here. This is an image that Denis Brzezinski managed to take of it on the very first night that it was visible. In fact, he managed to get some of the earliest images with a large focal length of this object, again because of his position, even though at the moment he's got problems being so far north with lack of night time. He has got very, very good northern horizon, so he can get quite low down to the north. So this was a nice image. But another thing that it's shown is just how accomplished now amateurs are with spectroscopy. Here are a couple of examples of spectra of this nova. The one on the left by David Ledbetter, and the one on the right by, Robin Ledbetter, and the one on the right by Hugh Allen. The Robin Ledbetter one's particularly interesting because it's calibrated in absolute flux. And what it's showing is the development of the light output of the nova from 29th of April, which is the black line here, to the 6th of May, which is the green line. What you can see is that essentially there's this huge peak here, which is hydrogen alpha, which is staying roughly about the same size for a while, basically as the continuum falls away around it. The nova was about brighter than magnitude 6 at its brightest. It's now faded down to about magnitude 11 or so, but still well within the capabilities of most amateur instruments. And please try and keep an eye on it if you can. It's a difficult object, and particularly for those people further south than us, it's a very difficult object because it's very, very low underneath the pole. So we're actually ideally positioned to observe this nova through the summer. The bright northern skies will not be too much of a hindrance for an object this bright. It did though, and I said that Gary announced this on our webpage in the forum, did start an interesting discussion because one of the papers on this object was written by a guy called Professor Sumner Starfield. And Gary said, what an excellent name for an astronomer. And so there was a sequence of posts on here. So Gary said, yeah, he's a well-known astronomer. Then Robin said, well, my name, Robin Ledbetter, he didn't follow in the name. But then the one that I particularly liked was this one from David Swan. Now, I haven't actually checked whether this is true or not.
It is true.
It is true, is it? Right. So apparently there was a pair of people who wrote a load of papers on urology called Whedon and Splat. Which I think is great. And another reason to keep an eye on the BAA messages. Okay, anyway, so later in the night, as we move around, of course, Jupiter is becoming visible in the southern sky. Like all the planets at the moment, it's kind of languishing a bit far south in declination, but there have been some rather nice pictures, even from the UK. So I'll just run through a selection. You've already seen the Juno pictures. They're not quite up to that standard, but they're not bad given the declination of the planet at the moment. So Simon Kidd there, Martin Lewis, some more Martin Lewis pictures of Jupiter, a Paul Abel drawing, south at the top. Naturally, as visual observers do. Now, Damien, of course, has got a big advantage that he seems to be doing all his observing now with this thing called Chilescope, which is, I think, is it a 1 meter aperture telescope in Chile, presumably. So basically, rather than even having to bother to go abroad now to do his imaging, he's managed to get on this. But he is producing absolutely stunning images. So this is what you can do if you happen to have a 1 meter telescope south of the equator for a planet that's at this low declination at the moment. And a lovely image here of Io going into transit. So very, very nice. But what I would say is that even UK-based observers are managing with the technology these days to produce some pretty spectacular images. So don't let the fact that Damien's using this 1 meter telescope in Chile put you off having a go from here, because it is possible from here for sure. A couple more from Damien there in different wave bands. So then, as the sky moves around a bit more, we've got another planet which is languishing even further south, which of course is Saturn, down there in Sagittarius. Saturn is just above, this is the teapot of Sagittarius here, so the sort of steamy bit of the Milky Way is there. Saturn's there, and again, this is the view from La Palma. Those who are at Winchester, I was talking about CMOS cameras and CMOS sensors, and I mentioned a camera called the Sony A7S, which is a remarkable camera. It's probably the most sensitive, commercially available camera that there is at the moment. I also mentioned that I'd borrowed from Martin Mobley a very old lens that he had, which is a Canon 85mm f1.2L portrait lens. The reason I wanted those both, I took them to La Palma to do a time lapse, and to do a time lapse you've got to take lots of images one after the other, and you want fairly short exposures. This is an image with that system which is an exposure of 4 seconds, just 4 seconds. You've got M8 and M20 there, and M17 and M16 along the Milky Way. But down here, this is where Saturn is, just above M22 in this image, in a very, very busy part of the Milky Way. This is an image of Saturn here showing some storm features. This was, I think this is from Australia. Is this Trevor Barry? I think must be, given Saturn's declination at the moment, I think this must be a southern hemisphere image, but basically showing some really nice detail and showing that the rings are really wide open at the moment. I did have a look at Saturn visually the other night in a small telescope, a 6-inch telescope, and it's actually still a nice object to look at in the summer nights, particularly when it's a hazy night and the seeing is reasonably stable. So again, don't allow the fact that these planets are all at very, very low southern declinations to put you off from observing the planets. It's quite a pleasant activity in the summer at the moment when the sky is hazy. Then looking over to the east, this is kind of about 30 minutes past midnight UTC. You have Mars gradually climbing above the horizon. Mars, of course, is coming to its opposition. And these are some nice images that Damien sent, again presumably taken with Telescope, as Mars gradually approached through the beginning of the year, from January to April. So at the moment Mars is around about 15 arc seconds in diameter, but unfortunately it's at minus 22 degrees declination. So a real challenge to get good quality observations from the UK. But it is possible, again, people have been sending them in. But as always, Damien, with his 1 meter in South America, managed to get some of the best ones. Richard, I don't know, do you want to just say a few things about the features on here?
At the bottom there, you've got the south polar cap, which is starting to show some bright and dark features within it, and these will become more pronounced as the time goes on. You can also see some clouds around the north pole at the top, the north polar hood. There's no trace of equatorial cloud there, not a continuous band because it's too late for the equatorial cloud band, but there is a small orographic cloud near the volcano Marcia Mons. And what's interesting for the other observers is the large dark eye of Mars, Solus Lacus, which has been very large for about 30 years.
So is that?
Yeah, that's absolutely
that's
right.
that.
So that's very interesting to see.
Yeah, so there's a few pictures here. That's with it rotated a little bit further around. And a lot of detail again. Okay, so, oh dear, I think the laptop's struggling. I won't bother with that. This was the time lapse I shot, and it was basically going to show the sky. This is supposed to be running at 25 frames a second. It's doing about 1 every 5 seconds. But anyway, this is Saturn rising here. And it's a nice time lapse. If you have a look on my members page on the website, you can get a link that will take you to that, and that goes right round till Mars rises a little bit later in the night. Okay, so the big event in August is the Perseid meteors, and we have a really good display of Perseids planned this year, basically because the moon's out of the way. So And it's pretty well timed as well. So the maximum is on the morning of August the 13th, which happens to be a Monday morning, so Sunday night, Monday morning. But the Saturday night, Sunday night is likely to be very good as well, and it's new moon on August the 11th. So from a society point of view, it's ideal really to arrange a sort of maybe a meteor watch on the Saturday night when people don't have to go to work the following morning, or just persuade people to take the Monday morning off and have a meteor watch on the Sunday night, Monday morning. So basically Perseids start becoming visible sometime around late July. They go on through till late August, but the peak is quite broad, something like the 12th, 13th and 14th of August. These are just some from last year that I picked up on my video camera system. So basically everything is set fair for a good Perseid meteor shower. We just have to keep our fingers crossed for some good clear weather. The moon, yes, the moon is there. This is a really nice picture of Clavius by Bill Leatherbarrow. The reason I've got this here is because it tells you when you can't actually do any other astronomy. So basically we know, we can see that we've just gone through full moon, May 29th. The next one is June the 28th, and then the following one is July 27th. But the peak of our Perseids, conveniently the moon is out of the way for that. There is a way of dimming the moon, of course, and that is by putting the Earth in the way of the sun and casting a shadow on it. And we do have one of those coming up. But we also use the moon as a very convenient occulting disk to form solar eclipses. And there are two of those coming up over the next couple of months. The first one on July 13th, it's a partial eclipse, maximum of 33% coverage, visible from the very, very south Indian Ocean there, just clipping Australia and Tasmania. So not many people are going to see that one. The second, which is on August the 11th, which is actually the new moon that we get the Perseids for, is the north, effectively the North Pole instead of the South Pole, and it is visible just from the very north of Scotland. So if you happen to be where Dennis is, I think he sees an obscuration of about 0.0%, a very small partial eclipse, but at least he can see it. And if you happen to be at Cape Wrath, it's slightly bigger, nearer 1%, I think. So there is indeed a partial eclipse visible from Great Britain this year. But the main eclipse probably is the lunar eclipse. So this is that occasion when the light of the full moon is attenuated sufficiently that we can do some proper astronomy. The problem with this eclipse from our point of view, though, is that it is only going to be visible very, very low in the southeast. So this eclipse on the 27th of July, the moon rises in totality as far as we're concerned from the UK, and in fact the further to the south and east you are, the better. From where I am in Essex, I'll see the moon rising about midway through totality into a reasonably bright sky, but this kind of view. So remember that date for the lunar eclipse, the 27th of July. Just find yourself a place with a really good clear southeastern horizon and watch the moon rise in eclipse, or watch the clouds depending on how the weather goes. Yeah, Callum said, unfortunately, as one of my failures as Comet Section Director has been coming up with any decent comets. I think it's asking a bit much of me. It wasn't in the terms of reference I was given when I agreed to be Section Director. But there are a couple of reasonably decent comets coming up this year. They're both periodic comets, and so unlike most comets, we actually know how well they're likely to perform. So I think we can make pretty good predictions as to how well they're going to perform in terms of brightness and what they're going to look like. And we also know their orbit extremely well. One of them is this one, 21P Giacobini Zinner. The next one, which we'll talk about in Sky Notes later in the year, is 46P Comet Virtanen, which is actually going to be slightly brighter. So these are both short period comets. This one has a period of 6.6 years, but we happen to have a really good pass this year. So this comet is coming pretty close to us, and it's very, very well positioned for the northern hemisphere. So it starts off pretty much about now, so the beginning of June. It's currently in Cygnus. It's currently about magnitude 13. It'll probably get to about 5th magnitude or so sometime around August when it's going through Cassiopeia and down into Auriga. So it's extremely well placed. It's not going to be a really spectacular comet. It's probably going to be a big fuzzball, but it's the best that we've got at the moment, and it's certainly something you should be able to follow in binoculars and should be able to get some quite nice images of it even with fairly simple equipment. For those who are interested in taking images of comets when they're close to deep sky objects, it does actually pass very close to the North America American Nebula, NGC 7000, towards the end of June, and it actually crosses over M35 in Gemini sometime in early September, late August. In fact, the pass through NGC 7000, whoops, what was that? Oh, yeah, right. So this is actually a picture of what it looks like at the moment. This shows you it's not the most spectacular comet in the world. This is Peter Carson's image of it taken May 7th. So it's currently, as I say, around Mag 13, probably about Mag 14 when this was taken, in a very, very busy star field because it's in the Milky Way. And this is what it's going to do through June, passing right by the North American Nebula on the 20th and 21st of June. So if it were a decent comet, that would be a really spectacular image because you'd effectively have the nice red of the North American Nebula and a kind of greeny blue comet. As it happens, the comet, when it goes past the North American Nebula, will probably only be something like 12th magnitude or so. So it's not going to be that easy to do, but those people who are enthusiastic about this will probably try and get some quite nice images of this as it goes past that object. So watch out for 21P through the summer. There are a couple of other comets that are around at the moment, but none of them are particularly bright. This is 2016 M1 Pan-STARRS, and this one is, which one is this? This is 2016 N6. So these are the kind of things that we have to do with in the comet section at the moment. They're really quite faint, not particularly wonderful comets, but they are things that allow us to keep imaging and keep measuring these objects. And I am really trying to find a nice bright comet that we can image in the sky, but it's really difficult now. There doesn't seem to be anything around. This thing about taking images of comets as they're close to deep sky objects, though, this was one particular example. This is Comet Smirnova, 74P. There's the comet, and you've got the two nice galaxies, M65 and M66 there. And these things happen every now and again, and so comet observers are quite adept now at finding when these objects are actually passing close to deep sky objects, and there are actually websites that will help you find these conjunctions. So just finally then, we've been through the sky, just looking at some of the things for the future over the summer. Mercury has got a number of elongations through the summer. This is probably the best one. This is a morning elongation around the end of August. There was a reasonably good one at the end of May, and this is a really nice example of taking some amateur images. So this is these are images by Martin Lewis of Mercury compared with spacecraft images that have been blurred to match, and it doesn't show up too well on the screen. It might do on the side, but it's really good how much correlation there is between the amateur image and the spacecraft image. Again, just showing how amazing it is that amateurs now can image these very small objects. Same thing there with Mercury. There's a conjunction, well, every month really at the moment, there's a conjunction of the Moon with Venus. They're not particularly close. This is the one on 16th of June, where you've got the young crescent moon here and Venus about 6 degrees apart. This is the one that there was just at the beginning of May, again with Venus up here and the moon down there. They're nice photogenic things. It would be more helpful if they were closer together, but they're nice to get through the summer. And then finally, I just wanted to show this movie, but it's not working. This is, I went to La Palma with Nigel Evans, and Nigel is always very good at finding interesting things to do with with his cameras. What this movie shows, and you'll probably be able to see it on the website soon, is the Moon and Venus setting tracked at sidereal rate. And so you see the moon moving relative to the stars, and then as it gets close to the cloud deck, the moon and the stars start moving upwards as they're refracted, and then turn into this sort of squiggly mess, which Bill actually said reminded him of the Seeing in Sheffield, and then disappear below the clouds. Anyway, enjoy the summer. There's lots to observe. If you are going on holiday somewhere south, try and sneak into your luggage at least something that you can observe the southern sky with, so a pair of binoculars or a simple camera or something like that. And at least 1 or 2 of the nights that you're away, sneak out and go and have a look along that southern horizon and see what the sky looks like down there in Sagittarius. For those of us who are in the UK for most of the summer, there's still a lot to do. If you can observe that nova, please do it. Keep an eye on the sun. And watch out for the eclipses. If you're in northern Scotland, have a go with the partial eclipse, but for everyone else, see if you can get that rising, totally eclipsed moon. So lots to do, lots to see, Perseid meteors. Have fun with it all, and I'll see you all again in September. Thank you very much.